Hi, I'm Steve Traw with the third in a series of archival videos I'm doing on my time as a music major at WVU. A straight line can be drawn between my future and the time I spent as a music major in the years of 1968 and 1969. They were truly incredible. Now, when I first got on the ensemble, I was sort of low man on the totem pole, and all I got to play were the toys, the tambourines and triangles and castanets, and the fire siren. We played Edgar Varèse's famous Ionization, which had a hand crank fire siren part in it, and for some reason I seemed to be the most appropriate guy to get it. My father never let me live it down. He was used to coming to concerts and see me be the soloist, and he came and saw me playing these little instruments. But I was not to be deterred. I played those parts with my heart and soul, and not being a shrinking violet, with a little flair. And audiences noticed. I remember we played Jimmy Webb's MacArthur Park that G.A. Ramonco arranged. And he had been my teacher earlier on when I was in high school. He came up to me afterward and said, "I never realized the potential of that auxiliary percussion part." And I said, "Well, G.A., once I realized it was the focus of the whole arrangement, I just had to do my best." Even though I went to see G.A. perform on the drum set whenever I could, it was an inspiration in musicality and finesse, I wouldn't see him for decades after I left the university. I think the last time was at the 1992 Percussive Arts Society convention in Indianapolis, where Harvey Mason was playing a piece I'd written for him, Masonata, that was commissioned by the Remo Drum Company. And he and I also did a drum duet after it was over. That summer, Phil Faini was in Africa doing research on the music of various areas, with an emphasis on what was happening in Uganda, specifically the Baganda tribe. And he came back with a whole collection of instruments, not just from there, but from everywhere, and set up an African ensemble and started to teach us the seemingly simple, but once you got into it, very complex music of that tribe. And it really changed my life in my perspective of music, as you will see as time goes on. Now, if that weren't enough, the ensemble was informed that after a competition of ensembles from all over the country, we had been selected to go on a goodwill tour representing the United States to 9 countries in Central and South America. So we really started rehearsing every minute we could. I remember that winter break, we rehearsed every single day of the break, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and then pretty much every time I had a break from then on. So it was pretty intense, and nobody minded. We were so excited. And there was a lot to do. We had to get shots and passports. We took Spanish classes. We did cultural studies, awareness. And of course, we had to get cases, many of them custom made, for all of our equipment that we were going to carry. I think there were over 40, and they were pretty big. Now, the State Department provided us with a representative. I think his name was Bob. And I didn't envy his job of getting all this equipment from place to place and getting it through customs in time as we went from country to country. Now, we left in June, and I remember at that time I was so excited because I was going to take my first flight in an airplane, and we got on a Pan Am flight in Pittsburgh Airport. And at that time, they didn't have jetways. You had to get on the tarmac and go up the steps, as you can see in this picture. And it would be the first of many, many flights we took, one of which we almost died. It's an adventure I will tell you about as we get going on. Now, the first country they took us to was Haiti. And they don't speak Spanish in Haiti. They speak a kind of Creole French, which I guess some of us who knew French could sort of understand. And I was shocked to get off the plane because there were guards carrying automatic weapons standing all along the roof of the airport. And that was a time when the notorious, ruthless dictator Papa Doc was in charge of the country and kind of held a stranglehold on it. And so I asked, are there some laws that we have to be really careful about not to get in trouble with? And they said, oh, they change all the time. If they put you up against a wall and shoot you, you know you've done something wrong. So, but it was a country that didn't seem to have any rules. Everything was really loose. They put us up in this really cool converted French mansion for living in a hotel. I remember we had this spacious room and these billowing windows, kind of like out of Casablanca. And they had a swimming pool, and we put it was so hot, we put all the pool furniture in the pool and sat in it there. And the waiters would come out and bring us drinks and pineapples and that kind of stuff. It was no big deal. Now, Haiti was almost like being in Africa at the time. You could hear voodoo drums up in the hills at night. And one thing we enjoyed was that there were these villages, and they had market days, one at each village for each day of the week. And we were able to pick our village and go over there and enjoy it. It was amazing to see all the handmade stuff. And of course, we got some souvenirs and stuff like that. The next place we went was Trinidad. And in Trinidad, they also don't speak Spanish. They speak a form of English that's hard to understand because they put the emphasis on a different syllable. But two things stand out. It was our first opportunity to see a steel drum band. And this was a group that was pretty well known. They were about our age. And man, they were good. And they've had every different size of drum. You know, today it's pretty common to see these groups. But back then, I don't remember them being very well known in the United States. One of the places they took us was this rum distillery. And it was a beautiful place. It was real nice inside in this tasting room. And they walked around with these silver trays of the 21 different kinds of rum they made. Well, being adventurous, some of the group had to taste every single flavor, had 21 quarter shots of rum. So it was a real memory to walk out of that place, stagger out of there, and pour them into the van. And very little sympathy was given to the hangovers they had the next day. The next place we went was Panama. And there are a few things I remember about Panama. Probably the most outstanding one was that they took us to a place that had never been performed, where no American group had ever performed. And Bob said, well, this is kind of an experiment. We're going to see how it goes. So we got in these shuttles, and we drove miles and miles and miles in this jungle until we showed up at this remote town with dirt streets and wooden sidewalks, and we played in a Quonset hut. But people came from everywhere, and it was a big hit. It was fun for us. The acoustics were interesting. And so it was a very memorable trip. The other thing I remember was it was the first place we went to that they spoke Spanish, and we're all struggling to try to remember any phrase we could. Now, after this, we went to 6 more countries, and I think it was Colombia, Ecuador, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. And it's just kind of a blur of traveling and concerts in these beautiful places. But I have a few things I want to talk about that I think you'll find interesting. One is that we had a per diem that we got, which was $19 a day. And we had to cover our accommodations and our food with that. But whatever we didn't spend, we got to keep. We'd starve ourselves all day, and after a concert, we'd go to these receptions at the U.S. Embassy, and we'd load up on hors d'oeuvres. I remember somebody ate 30 shrimp cocktail. They didn't feel great after it was over with, but that's how we saved money. I think I had about $20 in my pocket when we left, and I walked back with tons of wonderful gifts for everybody, and about $150 in my pocket. So that was one of our strategies. Another thing that happened was we played at an all-girls school, and we were mobbed after it was over with. I mean, I remember signing autographs for 45 minutes. And there was this one young lady who was smitten by John Rathbone, who was a pretty handsome guy, and let him know that she'd like to spend some time with him. And John thought, okay, this is another level of cultural exchange, and said, okay, what do you want to do? She says, well, let's go for a walk in the park. So John was looking forward to it until he got out there and found that her grandmother was going to chaperone the two of them. And that in their culture, this was, and it showed his intent to get married to this good little Catholic girl. So John couldn't get out of there soon enough, and so it was sort of an awkward cultural exchange at that point in time. John, I hope you don't mind me telling this story on you. Another thing I promised to tell you from before was these flights we took. We were warned that this one I think we took like 19 flights, so it was always... and we were warned about this one airline, Avianca airline, by some Peace Corps guys we ran into. And lo and behold, I think we flew with them about 3 times. And on the 3rd time, fate kindly brought to fruition this warning. This plane, we had just served dinner, and the pilot came on and said, we're about to run into some turbulence, don't worry. After which he immediately flew into a thunderhead, and we dropped 3,000 feet, and food went everywhere. Sitting while we're falling, we're looking at this food up in the air, and I look over at the steward, and apparently this happened all the time because he took his coffee cup and stuck it up on the ceiling so it wouldn't spill. We came out of it, the food's landed every place, and he just brought his coffee down and took a drink. And that was just the first leg of this scary adventure. We were about to go land at an airport that was new, that the pilot had never landed at. And I saw it out the window. It just looked like a strip, a landing strip they'd carved out of the jungle. And he realized as we were going in that his approach was not at the right angle, was not straight enough. And so all of a sudden he banks the airplane really hard. We come down and we hit the landing strip off balance, and we were going from one tower to the other. Boom, 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 boom as we go down. And finally, it pulls out. And so that was our last time with Avianca Airline, and it was a stuff of nightmares. One more experience that I think you'll find interesting is that we had to take a bus from Bogota, Colombia, to Cartagena, Colombia. And it's a long 18-hour drive. I don't know if we drove all 18 in this bus, but we found out that the buses, at least the one they got for us, was a homemade bus. And it was common for people to take a truck and take the truck bed and build a customized shell around it. And then put in a door, put in seats and windows, and they had their own bus. And the guy who was driving the bus was really excited to see a bunch of Americans, and he was particularly proud of his sound system. He had taken speakers and put them all along the sides of the bus, up on the roof, from the front to the back, and he had this cassette player he just loved. So here we go. I wanted to show how hip an American he could be. We're driving 70 miles an hour down a one-lane road through jungle, branches flapping against the windows, and he's playing Jimi Hendrix as loud as possible through the speakers. And I remember, to put a cherry on the top, him slamming the brakes at one point because he almost hit a guy driving a donkey cart, just ambling along, and he was going 70 at the time. But we made it alive somehow down to Cartagena, and there was a beautiful beach community right on the Caribbean. One thing we learned was the Caribbean was saltier than the normal, and you could float. It's hard to even get underneath the water. By the way, back to Panama, I remember one of the fun things we did was we went swimming in the Caribbean, drove all the way across the peninsula, and went swimming in the Pacific on the same day. We thought that was a pretty cool thing to do. The final thing I want to relate is it was a time when I started writing music more seriously, and I brought some notation paper with me, and while we were flying from place to place, I would start writing. And I got the idea, if you remember me talking to you about the African ensemble, to do a piece that compared the rhythms in the African group to the way we handle polyrhythms in the West. To give you an example, in African music, there's more than one downbeat. And it was basically, you could hear it in 3/4, and or you could go over 1/8 note to what would be the end of one and hear it in 6/8, an eighth note over. So a rhythm in 3/4 that we played was da 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 da. But if you shift over and listen to the downbeat 1/8 note later in 6/8, it went ba da ba do ba ba da 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 ba do ba ba da da da. So it had a completely different personality, and it was a revelation to me that you could have this kind of floating rhythms. So the idea was to write these two arrangements, and it turned out I was enjoying the piece, and it turned out to be really a pivotal little piece. Because when I got to Los Angeles, by sheer fluke, it led to a set of circumstances where in 2 years I would be writing music for the Los Angeles Philharmonic.